One of those things that really bugged me when I started reading about late Roman history was that it always appeared to me that the Eastern Roman Empire didn't help the Western Roman Empire enough in order to fight the massive barbarian invasions that took place starting in the early 5th century, where wave upon wave of Germanic tribes just branded onto the Roman defenses, breaching them, penetrating deep into the heartlands of the Western Roman Empire like a relentless storm, where entire nations, hundreds of thousands of people just poured into the Western Roman Empire on an absolutely massive and unprecedented scale. But where was the help from the Eastern Roman Empire? Where was the Eastern Roman Empire when Rome was sacked in 410? Where was the East when Gaul, Spain, and later Africa were overrun by various Germanic tribes who then could establish their own de facto kingdoms on the territory of the Roman Empire? Shouldn't the Eastern Roman Empire have seen this as a matter of the highest national security to help the Western Roman Empire as much as they possibly could? For can the right hand survive if the left has been cut off, or vice versa? And yet it seemed to me that the East did surprisingly little to help the West in the times of dire need, save maybe for an expedition here or there. But is that true? Was that initial assessment of mine correct? Do I need to change my view on that matter? So let's try to think about this and see whether the Eastern Roman Empire helped the Western Roman Empire enough in the brutal times of the 5th century, which would then lead to the fall of the West. Well, some among you might, of course, immediately say that it's very obvious that the Eastern Roman Empire didn't help the West enough. Because if it had helped the West enough, then the West would not have fallen. And therefore, the East did not help the West enough. Very simple. And indeed, that viewpoint is not entirely wrong. After all, I sometimes like to say that the success of the Eastern Roman Empire was built upon the demise of the West. One thing had to be sacrificed in order to make the other one stronger. There is no free lunch, as they like to say, and this is also true for the shift of the power base from the traditional heartland of the Roman Empire, which had been the West for 1,000 years, to the East in the 4th century. And now to something different. The SPQR Shop. They make amazing rings, amazing pendants, attributes, terracottas, coin replicas. They make a lot of wonderful replicas of Roman items, and it's all 100% handcrafted. Let me tell you, the level of craftsmanship is absolutely incredible. You can even buy the one and only Maiorianus ring. And you can only get it on the SPQR Shop. But there are of course many other rings and amazing items that the SPQR Shop crafts with an incredible attention to detail. And with a code in the description, you will get a 20%, I repeat, a 20% price reduction on every purchase on the SPQR Shop. So don't hesitate and buy something nice for you or someone else as a present who also happens to like Roman history. Thanks for your attention, and back to the video. See, the problem of shifting the economic and political power base of that empire from west to east, which had been built from the west towards the east, upended 1,000 years of a status quo. When Constantine created his new capital, Constantinople, the New Rome, in 330 AD, a lot of the old power went to the east. Now it is of course logical that this would weaken the West. For instance, the West would lose its naval power, because Constantine would take the two Praetorian fleets of Italy, consisting of around 300 ships, and use them in his civil war against Licinius, the Eastern Roman Emperor of that time. After Constantinople was made capital, these Praetorian fleets would be henceforth harbored in the east and not anymore in the west. This would pose massive problems later on, when the West would have really needed these fleets against the barbarian invasions that began some 70 years later. It should also not be forgotten that Constantine plundered Rome and many other sites of many valuables, statues, and works of art in general to beautify his new capital of Constantinople. Many senators, artisans, and craftsmen went from the west to the east to his new capital, New Rome, Nova Roma. This, of course, led to a loss of prestige and a loss of economic power in the West. To top it off, there were quite a few civil wars between the Western and the Eastern Roman Empire in the 4th century. Magnentius from the west versus Constantius II from the east. Magnus Maximus in the west versus Theodosius from the east. Eugenius and Arbogast from the west versus Stilicho and Theodosius from the east. These civil wars took place from the 350s all the way into the 390s. And incredibly, the East won all of these civil wars, which, if you think about it, is not that surprising, because we can assume that the best generals and military personnel followed the emperor to the east, because after all, Constantinople was now the seat of the Roman emperor and not anymore Rome. Hence, the East probably had the better generals. The outcome was that these civil wars cost the West dearly. The loss of Roman life in the Western Roman army could never be replenished. And so in the 390s AD, the Western Roman Empire found itself bereft of its naval power, bereft of its ancient political and economic status, bereft of its legions, and bereft of its best generals. A large percentage of the Western Roman legions died in these senseless civil wars. After the Battle of the Frigidus River in 394 AD, the situation was so bad in the west that Flavius Stilicho, the eastern general who now had become the strongest man in the west, had to withdraw the Rhine border defense troops for the protection of Italy against the Germanic invaders, which is exactly why the Rhine border could be overrun relatively easily in 406 AD. It is exactly because the West had been weakened by these civil wars against the East that this could have happened. So therefore, we might rightfully be angry with the Eastern Roman Empire and say, hey East, you owe the Western Empire one. Your prosperity, your economic power, your naval fleet strength, your generals, you took that from the West, so you really owe the West one. So therefore, why didn't you help the West more, dear Eastern Roman Empire? Or did you? Well, that is exactly the question that we're trying to answer. Yes, it is true that in the 4th century, the Eastern Roman Empire was a detriment to the Western half. The success of the East really was built, in a sense, on the demise of the West. However, in the 5th century, things looked different. So when was the first time that the East actually sent really large reinforcements to help the West? In 406 AD and following years, when the Rhine frontier was breached by the barbarians? Or when Rome was sacked in 410? Or when the barbarians had managed to establish their own realms on the territory of the Western Roman Empire in the 410s and 420s? No, it was as late as 431 AD that decisive help arrived from the East. Apparently, it took the East quite a while to really understand the gravity of the situation in the West. When the Vandals marched into Africa, this is when the East sent the first reinforcements under command of the Germanic general Aspar. Unfortunately, the united Eastern and Western forces were still not able to defeat the Vandals. From 431 to 435, the Eastern forces tried to still continue fighting the Vandals, but at some point then in 435, Constantinople recalled Aspar and his troops because of a new foe that was approaching, namely the Huns. Talk about bad timing. In 441 then, the Emperor Theodosius II again sent help in order to retake Africa. And we have to give Theodosius II credit here, because he really did try to help the West, contrary to his father Arcadius, who had not really done much for the West. And so in 441, the East sent a massive fleet in order to reconquer Africa. It reached Sicily, and the island was swiftly reconquered for the Western Roman Empire, defeating all Vandals there. And this giant naval operation would have probably ended the Vandals once and for all. However, unfortunately, before this could go anywhere, of course, the Huns attacked again. We can see the impossibly difficult situation in which the Roman Empire was, really being attacked from all sides by many different enemies. And let's not even talk about the Persian Empire, which was always a looming threat in the east. And so unfortunately, the fleet in Sicily had to be recalled by Theodosius II because the soldiers were needed in the fight against the Huns. The next time then that the East would massively help the West was, and that is quite often forgotten, in 452. In that year, the Eastern Roman Emperor Marcian launched an attack into the Hunnic hinterland, exactly at the time when the Huns had invaded Italy. Namely, after the famous Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451, Attila was not entirely defeated. But he withdrew from the battle, and in the next year he invaded Italy, completely razing the city of Aquileia to the ground. And it was also then that Venice was born, when a lot of people fled from Attila's hordes on boats and sought refuge in the lagoon that would become Venice. The miraculous saving of Italy and Rome is often attributed to the Pope, but in reality it was Marcian's attack into the Hunnic hinterland which forced Attila to withdraw from Italy. So in 452, the Eastern Roman Empire really helped the West massively. However, there came no help in 455, when Rome was brutally sacked a second time in the 5th century, this time by the Vandals. The next time the East helped was in 467, when the Eastern Roman Emperor Leo I sent the capable general Anthemius to the west with some troops. 1 year later then, in 468, even more help would come from the east when Leo I sent a massive fleet of 1,100 ships to again try to reconquer the Vandal kingdom for the Roman Empire. However, this expedition ended in a brutal disaster due to an incredible amount of incompetence on part of the Eastern Roman fleet commander Basiliscus. I talked in this video here about why this giant naval operation failed in 468 AD. This disaster bankrupted the Eastern Roman Empire, and thus help could therefore not be sent in such a giant manner anymore. The next time there would come help from the east was in 474 AD, when Leo I, in one of his last acts, sent Julius Nepos with an army to the west in order to install a loyal partner in the west. And indeed, Nepos managed to depose the Emperor Glucerius in Ravenna and ended the rule of the Germanic Magister Militums when Gundobad fled to his Burgundian kingdom. But unfortunately, Julius Nepos made some grave tactical mistakes, about which I talked in this video here, and only 1 year later he had to flee to his home province of Dalmatia. But unfortunately after that, no help would come anymore from the east, because Leo I died in 474 and his successor Zeno was occupied with constant rebellions against him, and of course the eastern finances still hadn't recovered from the disaster of Cape Bon in 468. And so let us try to sum this up. The East caused a lot of trouble for the West in the 4th century, and there came no help in 406 AD during the breach of the Rhine frontier. There came no help in 410 and subsequent years during the sack of Rome, and no reinforcements to get rid of the barbarians who had settled on Roman lands. There also came no help in 455 during the second sack of Rome, and there came no help in the 460s when Marcellinus of Dalmatia wanted to attack and defeat Ricimer in Italy, and there also came no help in 472 AD to decisively help Anthemius against the very same ruthless Western Magister Militum Ricimer. There also came no help in 476 AD when Romulus Augustus was deposed, and there also came no help for Julius Nepos in order to reclaim the Western Roman throne and in order to depose Odoacer and restore the Western Roman Empire. However, There came decisive help from 431 to 435 against the Vandals. There came very large help in 441 against the Vandals. There came powerful help in 452 against the Huns. There came help in 467 with Emperor Anthemius from the east. And there came formidable help in 468 with a giant fleet against the Vandals. And there came again help in 474 with Julius Nepos and reinforcements. But the question now is, was this help enough? Or was it too little, too late? Well, I'm kind of torn. I have to say it's a bit of a mixed bag. Yes, the East certainly could have helped earlier. However, after 431, I get the impression that they really did try to help. Sure, they could have done even more, but they also had their own problems. There was the threat of the Huns looming, and there were the Persians as well. So there was pressure from the north and from the east. So yes, the East did definitely help the West significantly. But was it enough, considering the damage that had been inflicted on the West in the 4th century by the East? Well, I would say if they would have helped earlier and more decisively, that would have helped quite a lot. However, unfortunately, this of course depended very much on the emperor in power to decide. Some emperors helped a lot, others not so much. And the matters were complicated by the fact that the Eastern and Western Roman Empire were not always on good terms with each other, even in the 5th century. So then, did the East help the West enough? Yes and no. It's unfortunately a mixed bag. I wish there would be a clear answer, but as so often with Roman history, things are not so clear-cut. And so I presented the facts here, and you can decide for yourself if the Eastern Roman Empire did help the Western Roman Empire enough. I think that decision will be different from person to person. If you like this video, please consider supporting this channel on Patreon or via a YouTube membership, because it is your support which makes this channel possible. You would have my utmost gratitude. And of course, I want to thank everybody who supports Maiorianus. You people are amazing. And if you want to learn more about why the naval invasion against the Vandals failed so miserably in 468, you can watch the video in the upper right corner. But if you want to learn more about why basically all the tries to reconquer the Vandal kingdom failed, you can watch the other video in the lower right corner. I say thanks again to all friends of Roman history, gratias tibiago and bene valete.